Hey, so now we're on to But You Look So Good, challenges with invisible disabilities. And to the stage, founder, president, and chief executive officer, Invisible Disabilities Association, Wayne Connell. And joining him are panelists, chief executive officer and founder, Project Sanctuary, Heather Eel, neurodiverse communication specialist, A2Z Consulting, Tim Goldstein, and executive director, NAMI, Palm Beach County, Florida, Marsha Martino. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thanks everybody. We're very excited about our panel today for But You Look So Good. My name is Wayne Connell, and I'm the founder, president, and CEO of the Invisible Disabilities Association. And I actually am the founder and president of a DISH resource group called the Disability Advocates Network. I'm very excited to be with you. So what does But You Look So Good? You know, it's a phrase shared with people living daily with illness, pain, and disability, but what does it mean and imply? It often brings a sense of misunderstanding and disregard and even prejudice. You know, join this awesome panel of experts that we've been able to put together, and as we learn about the positive impact of validation, belief, and acceptance in the workplace and beyond. You know, our panelists today are going to provide insight and practical advice in areas of mental health, veterans support, neurodiversity, caregiving, and invisible disabilities. So we're joined today by Marsha Martino from Nami. Hi, Marsha, how are you today? So great to have you.
Well, thank you.
And then Heather Ely from Project Sanctuary. Thank you for joining us, Heather.
Thank you for having us on.
And then Tim Goldstein from A2Z Consulting. And thanks so much, Tim, for being part of this.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of just jump in a little bit, and I'm going to have you guys kind of introduce yourselves and tell us about the organization that you're involved with. So Heather, if you want to go and share a little bit about Project Sanctuary with us, and then why are you, it's a veterans organization, and why are you personally supporting veterans?
So as a registered nurse during the first Gulf War, I recognized our families were not being taken care of. They would come to my waiting room. It was mom, dad, 2 kids, the whole family, trying to find answers, trying to find support and help. And 15 years ago, we were all very aware of 9/11. We were all very aware of our how many deployments and how many families were affected. And as a nurse, I really just wanted to write a big check to an organization that was supporting military families, and there wasn't one. I live in the beautiful state of Colorado, year-round recreation, and I pulled together some experts and some teams and said, how can we better serve these families? So we do a 6-day therapeutic retreat for the entire family. We're a little bit different in that we have mental health, licensed professional counselors, recreation therapists, social works. It's a full team approach. We do some recreation, we do some classes, we teach these families tips and tools. And I am so passionate about it because these are the most phenomenal families. They're resilient, they want to do better. They're living with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries. It does affect the whole family. And they want help. They're seeking us out. They want to do better. They want to have a better standard for their children, and they're taking their mental health very seriously. And I can't imagine serving a better group.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I know you're just not in Colorado anymore, right? I mean, you guys are all over the nation, right?
Correct. We're in 8 states. We're from Seattle to make our program more accessible to everyone. Not everyone can travel. So Seattle, Texas, Maryland, North Carolina, and Georgia, as well as Colorado.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Well, Marsha, so welcome. I'd love to hear about Nami, what Nami is about and why you got involved with Nami.
So Nami is the largest mental health grassroots organization in the country. There are about 800 NAMIs around the country. I'm in Florida. There are about 25 here. The thing about Nami that's different is all of our programs and services are delivered by someone either with a mental health condition or a family member. So we don't have clinical services. We do connect people to clinical services. We certainly encourage people to access clinical services. But, when someone is having a problem with their mental health, they may have an hour or 2 hours of appointments a week. There's a lot of life outside of that. And so we have support groups and education programs for people with mental illness. And then we're pretty unique in that we offer them also to family members. So we have support groups for family members and for people living with mental illness, run by people with mental illness and by family members. And we have education programs that they teach someone with a mental health condition the best way to take care of themselves. It's really very empowering. How do you work with professionals? How do you adapt your life in a way to keep yourself healthy and out of the hospital? And then for family members, how to communicate with someone maybe who has a thought disorder, how to be supportive of someone, but let them have some autonomy. So really, it's a game changer. The family to family, many, many times we've had the feedback that it's a game changer for people. NAMI's support groups and education programs are developed on a national level. So if you went to a NAMI support group in Florida or in Texas or California, the structure would all be the same. And the same with our educational programs. They're evidence-based or best practice, and they are we're taught to teach them with fidelity.
So why did you get involved, Marcia?
I got involved. I've worked with people with disabilities my whole life, but I have a family member, a son who started having mental health issues, as often happens in late teens and early 20s. And I already knew of NAMI because we had worked with them, with the disability group I was working with. And so I called them for help and got some resources. Ultimately, my husband and I took a family to family class, which was so, I worked in mental health and I thought, I'll go to this, I'll check it out. When I signed up, the one I signed up for was 12 Saturdays in a row. And I thought, we work a lot of hours. I thought I'll make it to some of them. After the first class, it's like, man, we revolved our life around making it to those classes. It's very, very empowering for family members. So ultimately, I taught a class, then I was on the board, became the executive director, just sort of roll with it. So.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here today. So Tim, tell us all about your journey and what's A to Z Consulting.
Well, that's a darn good question. My journey is I wasn't actually diagnosed as having autism until I was 54. So through the vast majority of my life, I just didn't understand, didn't understand people very well, and wasn't necessarily very good at interactions that weren't logic-based interactions. Where A to Z Consulting comes in is I've done over the years, I've done quite a bit of IT consulting, which is the field that I work in. And actually, I do work for Google these days, but I do my, these kinds of things through my own company of KT Marketing. Or A to Z Consulting. They're kind of joined together. But those actually were a big help for me, because one of the challenges that often us autistic individuals have is we lose jobs pretty quick. And it's not that we're not skilled, but we somehow violate one of those tribe rules of the company that nobody even tells you is a rule, and we don't know it's a rule. And next thing we know, we're out the door, which means you have a spotty job history. So I came up with the wonderful conclusion that A, I already have a company, B, I've already done most of my work through the company. So instead of saying I worked for company A, B, C, and D with gaps in between, it was real simple. I worked for A to Z Consulting, my own company. And guess what? I had different clients that came and went. So it was kind of a roundabout way of solving two problems. First off, how do you just take care of the business end if you're doing business, consulting, those kind of things, and setting up your own company, certainly a good way to go. But it ended up being an amazing benefit once I found out I was autistic, of using it to, again, just I guess cover, you'd really say, cover my job history up with it looking continuous for a whole bunch of years instead of being broken up into little 1-year chunks and such.
Sure. Well, thank you. So I want to share a little bit about invisible disabilities too. And that, even though I get the joy of leading these other amazing people today on this panel, I want to share about that too. So Invisible Disabilities Association, I founded it back in 1996. And the reason for the founding of it was my wife, who at the age of 27 in 1991 was diagnosed with primary progressive MS. And in 92 diagnosed with Lyme disease, which we can trace back to when she was 14. And in 1996, she coined the phrase invisible disabilities because we'd park in accessible parking. People would scream at us, "You're not in a wheelchair. There's nothing wrong with you." Having no idea that she was in pain from head to toe and brain fog and a whole host of other things and unable to work. And so launched the organization. It's interesting, Marcia, you talked about as a grassroots. We're very much a grassroots organization. From the beginning, we launched it with volunteers, and I mean, we actually have one employee right now, even our executive director. And so, but we're changing the vision around the world of what disability really looks like, and it's not all just about a wheelchair. It's really about the impact of people across the board, and invisible symptoms is what invisible disabilities really are, and those things can be limiting and misunderstood. And we talked about PTSD and mental illness and autism. All those things are invisible, and they're all in your head, by the way. People always go, "Well, it's all in your head." Well, it is in my head, right? In a lot of cases. So that's what we do. And so in fact, our symbol right now is a symbol that we're using to change the perception. We're actually in 2 states, Alaska and Colorado already, where that symbol can now be, you can voluntarily have it put on your driver's license. And if you need it in a situation where you need, maybe an officer or somebody to take a second look and think differently about the conversation. And what's really exciting is about 2 weeks ago, we just got into the Congress, the Disability ID Act of 2022, which will actually provide funding for all the states who want to do that. So very exciting. But really what we're about is what I like to say is we're kind of the front porch. You guys are doing incredible stuff, and we want to point people your way. And that's what we love to do in Invisible Disabilities. So let me dive into some more questions here, really. So Heather, what are really the biggest issues facing veterans? And if we want to think about the workplace as well, how does that, what is that impact having on veterans? Obviously there's transition, there's dealing with illnesses and stuff, but what do you think?
So today's veterans differ from veterans of past eras, like Vietnam, in that we have better equipment and Kevlar and medical standards so that they lived through so many roadside blasts and lived through so many horrific things. And then the tempo of the deployments, they were stacked. I mean, we've seen veterans and families who've gone through 4 to 8 to 12 deployments. And so some of the post-traumatic stress can be layered over time. So most of our veterans, and the VA does bless the VA, but sometimes they label our veterans as unemployable, which they then believe that they're unemployable and that they're not, and I have to prove them wrong. And I'm like, well, if you think you're unemployable, come hang out with us, volunteer for a few retreats, and let's see if we can't put you in charge of logistics or cooking or something else, because they still have value. They still can be employed, but just with an organization that understands. And so when it comes to employment, yes, they may have a few more medical appointments. They may need to take time off to go to their VA appointments and to do some other things, but they're so amazing and resilient, and they take their job seriously. They want to do a good job. They love to work themselves up the ladder. But I think just giving grace to any employees, and just accepting where they are and asking, how can I be a better employee? What else do you need so that I can support you in the workplace so that you can perform and be successful and feel good about it?
Well, I think about what you guys do is with your retreats, where it's not just the spouse that's involved, it's the extended family. And if we think about it nowadays, as we come, we're not really post-COVID, we're kind of still coming out of this whole thing, but this whole new world of changes that we all felt anxiety, we all felt, fear, all these different aspects, but the work-life balance is really coming to a lot more into focus right now. And I think about, with the veterans and the necessity of the family around that, because going back to work, and you're being in the military now, you're going back to work, how does that, the retreats, what's that impact on, the family saying, hey, we think you can do it too, right? We think you can make that transition.
Yeah, so we never shut down for COVID. We took a few weeks off in April and we're back at it in May, simply because mental health was at the forefront, and it's just another layer of stress for our families. What we find the most challenging is we actually employ a lot of military spouses who are active duty and are constantly being moved and PCS'd and having to pick up their children and their families, continue to work, and then move as well, which makes it really, really challenging and stressful. And then conflicts like Russia and Ukraine has everyone on point. It's a trigger. We have to remind our families, please turn off the TV, please take a mental health break, take care of yourselves. It's constant. We're honored again to be able to help these families navigate through active duty, through veterans. It's a lot.
Awesome, thank you. So Marcia, obviously, the mental health aspect, we just talked about that with COVID and that impact, and and how is that impacting people really in the workplace? I mean, think about it. I mean, you're trying to figure out, each day how to just make it through the day. And now you got to go into an 8 hours and go work hard and those things. And sometimes, you get you may get a benefit of being able to work from home, but sometimes working from home is not always the best thing, right? Sometimes you need people. So you want to talk about that a little bit with Nami and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, well, I'm like Heather, we didn't close down. I was here every day. I got plenty of phone calls. I think that in a sort of positive aspect, it made the responses of anxiety and depression much more talked about in society. It's perhaps, I mean, I think one of the biggest barriers to getting help is stigma. And maybe it reduced the stigma a bit because we're sort of all in the same boat in this really anxious and depressing situation. People on average have symptoms for 10 years before they get help. And those can be 10 really, really hard years for people. And the barrier is stigma. I should be strong enough. I should be able to do this myself. I don't want, I'm not crazy. I mean, it's just the stigma around getting help is really pretty daunting. And I think working from home, it was kind of good and bad for some people. I mean, I think one of the issues that comes up and probably maybe not brought up a lot in the workplace, but having a huge impact is the illness of family members. So when we have kids who are in their late teens and early 20s, and they're starting to exhibit symptoms, it usually takes a period of time for that person, especially with a serious mental illness. It takes time. Well, first of all, you have those years that they have symptoms and they don't get help. But then when they're so symptomatic that you have to reach out for help, the time to stability, it takes a while. And I know for myself, when my son was ill, I was very challenged to, if you've never lived with someone with a mental illness, you can't in your wildest dreams imagine what it's like. But, it's like having a newborn times 20, I mean, a newborn that can walk and drive. And, I mean, it's like, you're not getting sleep. You're constantly vigilant, worried for their safety, worried for your safety. And then you have to go to work, so, it's not necessarily just your own mental health, but your family members' mental health that impacts someone's ability to work too. So getting it out there and talking about it, it's 1 in 5 people who has a mental illness. And when we think of that, we're thinking of schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. We're not thinking of depression and anxiety, which are the 2 most common mental health conditions, and they impact people's ability to work. But we're not talking about that because we can hide it.
Well, it's interesting, right? Since with Invisible Disabilities, we've been talking about these issues too, right? And it's not something, just snap out of it. It's you're just feeling bad or whatever. Now, a lot of it's neurological. We think it's psychological, it's neurological, which is not something you just snap out of. And just like with PTSD, I mean, it just, there has to be really a brain intervention that takes place for things to change in those areas. But I agree with you totally on the caregiving piece of it. That's a big part of the workplace too. I mean, I work for a company that's been very gracious on, I mean, times I got to take my wife to the doctor or whatever. And there's many times I'm sitting in the parking lot with my laptop on the steering wheel, working away while she's in the doctor's visit. And so it really is, but how are companies going to know unless we share? And so really it's continuing to, and this is one of the things that, Invisible Disabilities is trying to do is to bring that understanding that it's okay and safe, right? And even you mentioned some things like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder, those things, we still have misconceptions about those and misperceptions about those. And we think we know, it's just like with my wife, people always ask, well, is she in a wheelchair? It's like, well, not on a regular basis, but a wheelchair is not an indicator necessarily of the intensity of the illness. It just means that person doesn't have the use of their legs, although walking is very hard for her and those things, but you would know that. So it's about this, and it's really about a spectrum. And I'm gonna really push this over to Tim here, because really that aspect of when you talk about neurodiversity, I like what Tim calls it neurodistinct, right? We're all unique, but there is a spectrum. So Tim, talk about autism in the workplace, because it is a little bit different. Autism is not necessarily something where there was a trauma that happened. It was how you grew into it in some sense, right? So if you want to talk through that, thank you.
Sure. First thing to say is, I work in the tech industry. So for the most part, when I'm working with other autistics that are in the tech industry, we're talking about a group that's at the higher interactional ability of, autism. It is a spectrum disorder, which means there's a whole variety of different potential traits, potential, strengths, and any individual is going to have a different combination of those challenges. But if you want to get really down to what I think is the real challenge and key when you're in the workplace is we communicate very differently. And I think that's really the big challenge. When you look at autism, unfortunately, we often look at it by the diagnoses that were developed around children. And when you look at adult autistics, guess what? We don't normally sit there and flap our hands, which is one of the things that they look for in children. It really comes down to, it's again, the way we communicate. If you think, just imagine you're in a room and it's filled with people that are from a different country that has a very different culture and has a different language. And you know a few of the words of the language because you tried to study, but you know them by the dictionary. They know them by the way culturally all those words mean, and the overall strength and emotions and all those kind of things tied in behind those words. That's what it's like being autistic, because we use what we see is the correct word because the dictionary says that's the word. But sometimes, or very often, you find out that that word was not appropriate from an emotional standpoint. Even though technically, if you go look in the dictionary, there was nothing wrong with the word. It was actually the exact word to describe it. But give an example, we tend to be blunt. I say brutally blunt is a autistic trait that's fairly common. I say it's a human trait. It's just more common among autistics. And we might be in a meeting and just say, you caused that problem, or you broke that thing, or whatever it is you're working on. Without doing the more, we'll say neurotypical and what we're trained to do in management of, giving some positive praise, pointing to the area we need to work on, and then wrapping it up with some positive, end. We dispense with all that and just go straight at it. Here's the problem. What are we going to do? And that causes huge, huge amounts of problems, because we're not seen as fitting into the tribe because we don't know the rules. And, when you don't know the rules of the tribe starts worrying and wondering about you. Are you safe to be around? Are you, actually pulling toward the same things? So I think for me, that's where the biggest area of challenge comes up. And what I've seen in, again, people in the tech industry I work with, it's generally their communication that causes the problem. And it could be verbal and it could be written. I've even, had managers contact me about performance reviews that were put in by peers, but they happened to be autistic peers. And when you read it, it was very blunt and very direct and did not sound very nice about the person. But if you just sat down and looked at the dictionary definition, they were actually saying this person was quite capable. is really what they were saying, but they didn't say it in a way that was sensitive to everybody.
Right. Well, a big part of it, what you're talking about is, Heather, did you have a comment or?
No,
Okay.
I'm agreeing with everything he's saying.
Well, a big part of this is really I think as we're all talking about is when it comes to the workplace is about education, right? We talk about prejudice or stigma. Of course, Marsha, you guys, Nami has the best commercials on the planet, overcoming stigma. I just love it. That is, and that what's interesting is that came out years before COVID, which is pretty crazy. It was perfect timing. But, really this aspect of stigma or prejudice or those things is we're not, we like to say we like to believe people at Invisible Disabilities and believe them. So when somebody shares their story with you and they share why they are the way they are and what works for them and doesn't work for them, and we turn around and say something like, oh, I know, I understand, or I can relate, or I'm tired too, or whatever, all those statements we like to make. Like, oh yeah, I got a friend who's got MS and they run 30 miles a day and they're 80 years old and stuff. Yeah, I get him, or whatever those things are. We it's the education piece. So as we think about this, we have a few more minutes and we'll take some questions from the audience. Talk about education, where you guys are about when education, what's one thing that you could educate somebody on that would help overcome some of that stigma or prejudice or those things. Just jump right in, whoever wants to take it. So.
Well, I guess I'll jump in. Oh, go ahead. No, you go
I just
ahead.
was going to say the incidence is there. It's 1 in 5. So, and the problem is because of the stigma, if you're one of the 1 in 5 and you can hide it, there's every motivation to do that. So, I agree that if someone says something, listen to them. And, some of our constituents have taken to, I want to talk to you. I'm not asking for you to solve my problem. I want to talk about it, because people right away, our inclination is, how can I fix this for you?
Right.
And, we're talking about chronic illness here. You're not going to fix it. Or, but we can help people have a good life. That's for sure. And I think that the more people who speak up, I've been treated for depression for 30 years and thank God, very successfully so, with just a simple antidepressant. And there's so much treatment resistant depression out there. I'm grateful that's not me. But I would never say to someone, oh, I have a mental illness, but I am one of the 1 in 5. So when I started working here and we're talking about sort of the 1 in 5 and no one, and I'm thinking I should put that out there. I have not missed a day of work in 10 years, literally. I worked all through COVID, me and my dog at our office. But, I'm a good mom, I'm a good wife, I'm a good employee, but I have a mental illness. And it's, right. And I think that if we put that out there, it's so many of us. Don't pretend you're not dealing with something.
Well, it's interesting about the
Marsha. I always diabetes or cancer or,
Right. I always like to say the most abnormal people are people who run Ironman triathlons or climb Mount Everest. Okay. The rest of us are normal, seriously. And what I think about that is, you mentioned, so here's 1 in 5, disabilities is the largest minority group in the world, 15% of the population. 50% of the people in America have at least one chronic illness, right? So there's all these statistics that seem overwhelming, but guess what? That is part of our life. And if we allow people to share and understand that that's what life is about. And there are very few people that are truly 100% quote healthy. We created this industry that even makes us all bad, right? Well, there must be something wrong because you're not doing something right. And because of the health industry that says you're perfect here if you do this thing, right? But it's not that way. These are all part of life. This is what shapes us. This is what makes us unique. What makes, Tim unique in what he does. I mean, there's stuff that Tim can do that I can't do or other people can't do, but there's stuff that I may be able to do, right? So it's this uniqueness of the diversity of us. So Heather, you were going to say something about the education piece?
Yes. And, Tim and Marsha are just right on. I love this panel. So thank you all. But we see it within our families. Yes, our primary goal is to help people understand their post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injuries. But you would not believe how many times one of our counselors sits a family down and says, we believe your child has autism. You might want to have that tested. Or looks at a spouse and go, guess what? You also probably have post-traumatic stress. That childhood event you lived through that you've successfully put in a box. So I think the more we can talk about our mental health and our capabilities and acceptance and reduce that stigma and let people know that there are choices, there's help, there's organizations, take that antidepressant for 30 years. I'm right there with you. I haven't missed any work, and I will take mine to the day I am not going to be depressed again. But there's help, and you can lead a wonderful, healthy life. Just ask for it.
I think a big part of this too is really, especially in the workplace, is we need to have people at the top share truly what's going on in their lives, because I always think about
Role
invisible
models,
disabilities. Everybody has a story, right? And when you talk to people about invisible disabilities, first 5 minutes, you're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anybody. And then within 5 minutes, they're naming off 20 people that are in their lives. They're like, oh my goodness, you're right. And so it really needs to start at the top. And for people to say, it's okay. It's okay if you're a caregiver. It's okay if, if you have a family member that's dealing with mental health issues or PTSD, or you yourself are even, because once we start to do that and understand that, we think, oh, there's ADA and there's HIPAA and there's all these crazy things that impact it. But the reality is that, yes, you do have to be able to perform the job that required. That's what ADA says. No matter how much accommodations you get, you still have to perform the job. And we understand that. And some people are not able to, and they're disabled, right? They're not able to work. And that's okay too. We don't need to go blame them and say, well, get off the couch and go work. Well, if they're not able to work, then they shouldn't be treated like they're bad as well, right? And that's what we have to deal with it all the time. Invisible disabilities. My wife would love to work, multiple college degrees, and she hasn't been able to work since she was 27. And it breaks her heart every day when people go, oh, you're lucky, you don't have to work.
And the fallout for family members when they have a loved one, especially their like adult child with a mental illness.
Yeah.
And like, you're enabling, they're lazy. And I say, who wants to there is so much motivation in life for a 20-some-year-old to have a job, get out of the house, buy a car, go to work. Like, why would someone pretend to be sick and stay in their bedroom every day so that their parents could support them because they're lazy? I'm like, that makes no sense at all.
Yeah, and who likes going to doctors all the time, right?
But the parents are beaten up for being, enabling a lazy kid. And it's like, really, it just makes no sense.
Right. Well, I agree. So do we have any questions, Nadine, or from the audience at all that?
So Wayne, two things. Someone commented and said destigmatization. I'm not sure if that's a real word, but destigmatization
I love it.
is what is needed.
Right.
Someone else said people tend to disclose only when or if an accommodation is needed. What do you all think about disclosing even if you don't have a need for a workplace support of some type?
So I want to address that, the whole accommodation issue. First thing is they don't even disclose that they need an accommodation.
Yeah.
I want to start there. And the reality is they need to feel safe to be able to do that first, right? And the only way that's going to happen is education in the company, where the company says, it's okay. It's part of life. Some people speak Spanish, some people have a disability. I mean, seriously, it needs to really be, our organization's mission statement is, our vision statement is called Invisible No More. That means that everybody's the same. Stop treating people differently. So we need to make that first. And then, if you're in a group, get involved in an ERG. You guys put on a big event yesterday with ERGs, and I managed, founded the ERG here at Dish. It's a place for people to talk about it. And there's like, well, what happens if my boss is in there? Well, that's okay. So your boss is in there and your boss now knows about it and your boss knows you're a great employee. Why should it change? We need to understand, we need for people to understand that there's all these people in the workplace that are actually living with disabilities or mental health issues or whatever it is that we don't know about, and they're doing their job great. So why would we think that all of a sudden they would change it once we know what they're going through? It shouldn't change. You guys' thoughts?
Yeah, and you're right on that. It's goes both ways. So many times veterans won't say or advocate for themselves, hey, this desk arrangement is triggering my post-traumatic stress. I need to be facing this way instead so people aren't walking up behind me. So we try to empower our veterans and our families to advocate for themselves and speak up, but also as an employer to look at our employees or our one-on-ones and say, how can I best support you in your role? What else do you need? That may open the conversation to, hey, I can't sit with my back to traffic. I need to move. And, hopefully that's for everyone, whether they have a disability or not, invisible. Everyone should be given that opportunity to be heard and felt valued by their employers.
No, I
Most
agree,
people
absolutely.
wouldn't think twice about asking for a different chair because this one makes their back ache. But they would think twice about saying, I'm having sleep issues, which is a very common issue with mental health. I'm having sleep issues. Can I adjust my hours to come in a half an hour later? Because, that's, it's just, what people are willing to ask for physically and what they're small accommodation willing to ask for cognitively or mentally is very different.
Yeah, we haven't made it safe. I mean, Tim, I think about how many people at my company, right, have autism that probably nobody knows, right? I mean, we're a tech company as well, like you mentioned, and I'm sure that's the case. And it's like, and they might need you're right, Marsha, most accommodations they say are super simple accommodations. They don't cost anything. In a lot of cases, they don't cost. It's an adjustment of the schedule. It's as Heather mentioned, I mean, you have a big cubicle farm, and if somebody needs to be near a restroom and they say, I need to be closer to the restrooms, then put them closer to the restrooms. But sometimes I will tell you, it's a 4-week or a 2-month deal to be able to move, right? Or to do the simple accommodation because of all the tape and not believing in why it's got to go to so-and-so facilities and HR and blah, blah, blah. So kind of crazy. So Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would say that, the whole idea that awareness is where we have to start, for sure. But I think that doesn't go far enough. Simply being aware that there's autistic individuals at your company, at my company, at, any of our companies isn't enough. You need to be able to identify that, oh my gosh, I actually work with an autistic individual. And gosh, I've worked with that person for 10 years. Huh. That's why they're a little quirky, but I still like them. And that's the part we're missing pointing out, or I say making comfortable enough and safe enough, the old psychological safety. We're back to DEI again, right? Making enough psychological safety so people can actually say, hey, I'm autistic. And then everybody goes, well, they're pretty normal. They do a good job. I guess autism isn't what I thought it was. And it makes all the difference. Just as an example, I work on the training team nowadays. We're a global group. It's one of the few totally global groups. It's managed by one manager, the whole world. And we have another individual in the team that is autistic. And he was on the team for a couple of years before I joined, but he never told anybody. When I come in, I believe in telling people right up front, because that way, when I make some kind of autistic thing comes out, hey, better they're warned than it's a surprise. But what he actually said in a meeting we had the other day was, when I came along and actually said I was autistic to everybody, that gave him the comfort to be able to say that also. And now everybody knows he's autistic. So what's that mean? Well, good. That's where we have to go the step beyond awareness to understanding. What's it mean? It means he thinks, processes, and perceives differently. So you just have to say, hey, did you get it? No, I didn't get it. It's like, how about this? Communication again.
Right. So a couple of things I want to say too is that one, if you want to learn about what somebody is living with, and ask them, they're the experts. We always think that we know, we're the armchair quarterback. Oh, I know all about autism, tell me about it, right? Versus, hey, I don't know what PTSD is. I'd love to learn, I want to be an ally. I want to be a friend. I want to learn those things. So that, that's a big part is that learning. But it's also about, like I said, it's back to this whole thing of it starting at the top down in companies that really need to show from the top down. We did an event with the Bureau of Land Management, and one of their main managers was at one of the panelists afterwards. And he shared that when people would shake his hand, he would have this nerve disorder that would literally shoot an incredible pain into his head, so bad that it would make him like double over. And everybody's like, and he's like, that's why I don't shake your hand. And of course, the whole group was like, oh my goodness, they just thought he was like the most rudest person and he didn't care anything about anybody below. And so that's where that understanding, you're right, it's about the individual person, and you want to learn about the people around you. If you're a manager, it's about your team, right? We're all caught up in the ADA and HIPAA. That's, we don't want to violate people's things, but the reality is we also have to work together, and we have to understand that maybe why, in an email, why somebody is immediately, they don't say, hey, good morning. They just say, this is the next thing, and don't even put your name in or anything. Maybe that's just how they operate, and you need to learn that that's okay. And they don't think that you're a horrible person. They're trying to, direct you or something like that. So,
NAMI
any
has
final
a
thoughts?
stigma-free program. If you go to the NAMI website, there's
Awesome.
a whole stigma-free program that's for businesses. And many local NAMIs are willing to bring that in. Lunch and learns are a great thing. You bring someone in, they give a presentation, and oh, by the way, I'm someone who's living with, whatever
Right.
it is. And that can really be helpful as well.
Awesome. So Marcia, what's the website address for NAMI?
NAMI.org.
Okay, great.
NAMI.org.
Awesome. And Heather, how can we get a hold of you?
I am projectsanctuary.us.
Awesome. And Tim, I think it's timgoldstein.com. Is that the best? Awesome.
Yeah, it's easy. TimGoldstein.com. It's easy to remember.
There we go. Well, I'll tell you, you guys have been amazing. The subject is always, you can go for hours on the subject, but I hope we help some professionals in the workplace to understand that education, awareness, empathy, validating, listening, all those things, those skills we think we need to learn. Well, when it comes to illnesses and disabilities, it's really something you have to hone in on. And remember that people have value, as Heather, you said. We're all valuable. And remember that first, we're all part of this human race together, and we're not lesser because we're dealing with something that might impact our lives. So I really appreciate you all, and thank you so much for being here. Nadine, thank you for allowing us to be part of this.
Thank you so much. I
Thank
know
you.
that was
Thank you.
extremely impactful, and we will turn it over back to Yvette.
Okay, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
All righty. Thanks,
now.
Wayne. Thanks, Heather. Thanks, Tim, and thanks, Marcia.